Everybody, welcome. Why don't we give a round of applause for our guests today? All right, so everybody, thank you for being here on time. We're in here for an indeterminate length, anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes. It all depends on how the conversation's going. I have a couple announcements I want to say before we get started here. The first is tonight, we're hoping that you guys come back and you bring people with you. Okay, so right now, try to think about who in your circle of people you can bring to the event tonight. Doors open at 6. At 6:20, we're going to air The Eye of the Storm. That's one of the documentary films made about Jane Elliott's eye color exercise. That's about 20-25 minutes after that. We're trying to produce another film based on this conversation here. And so anyone with cameras in here, video cameras in here, if by any chance you get video of students asking a question, try to get that to me so we can include that in the video. Whether we do that or not, we are at 7 o'clock, going to start promptly at 7 tonight. As you know, this is student-led. So we have 4 students that are going to do different introductions tonight. I'm guessing it takes 10 to 15 minutes. You know how those things are. But I want the students to be seen and heard. So 4 students that are going to make the introductions tonight. As soon as those introductions are done, let's say that's about 7:15 at the latest. Then we go right to questions. So there's actually no lecture tonight, even though we've been calling it a lecture. All right, so we'll go right to questions. Jane Elliott will be on the big screen. Mrs. Brown Trickey will be with us in person on stage, and we'll direct questions back and forth between these 2 women. That's tonight's program. Does anybody want to ask me anything about that? All right, tell your friends that the first 25, this includes you, the first 25 students that walk in, McCaskey students that walk into the auditorium get gifted a free book. So first 25 stay at NBU. You can keep them, you can give them away as a gift, do whatever you want with those. So that's tonight. Here today, what we're going to do is I'm going to pose a bunch of questions. Now, you guys are students of mine. Many of you are students of mine. I cover the topic of Little Rock 9 in those classes. And so most of the questions that I'm going to ask are asked intentionally for you guys to get the story of Little Rock 9, which is why I want you guys to have your notebooks. All right, so many of you already have your notebooks out, but if there's anybody in here that does not, take that out now. Your cell phones, make sure that's not a distraction. All right, put those to the side, your pocket. Any earbuds, headphones, take those out of your ears, off your head. All right, give us your full attention. If you do want to take a photograph, you certainly can. So if you're taking your phone out because you want to take some pictures of anything, you certainly can do that. If Mrs. Brown Trickey says anything that is intriguing to you, you can look that stuff up on your phone. Just make sure you're focused on what's the conversation that's taking place here today. All righty? Okay.
Sorry, you did my bag could not do a day quill, so I won't cough my way through the whole thing. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. All right, so we're going to start here. After I'm done with my questions, then I'll be open up to the audience. So all of you then will have the opportunity to ask questions. When you do, introduce yourselves. Make sure you tell Mrs. Brown Trickey your name, and then pose your question. I may follow up. So at that point, I'm done talking unless I want to ask a follow-up question.
Okay.
One last thing, Mrs. Brown Trickey has done a lot of traveling. She just 2 days ago was speaking at a 2 days ago, Friday. She was speaking at a middle school in San Francisco. So we're fortunate to have you with us today for a lot. So thank you. Okay. All right. You all set?
Yeah.
All right. So the first question, we're gonna reconstruct the story to Little Rock 9. So the first question I'd like to ask is, can you tell us about segregation in Little Rock before 1957?
Okay. Segregation then and now. Okay. What segregation meant was, I'll talk about Central High School because it was very much like your school complex here. Huge school built at great expense in 1923, known as the most beautiful high school in America. And it had a gym, a field, a stadium, a track, every possible kind of resource you can imagine. And when you live in a city that's about 100,000, you pass by that school every day. And because the Black schools didn't have a gym, a stadium, a track, I'll say we, got to use the Central High School track and field and stadium. They had their football games on Friday, ours were on Saturday. So we had a familiarity with this amazing, beautiful building. So what was segregation? Well, it was back of the bus, sit on the back of the bus, and I'll tell a little story about what that means. When I was 6 in the first grade, buses cost a nickel. And when you're 6, you can take the bus yourself. And I was throwing my nickel up and catching it in my mouth. And what do you think happened? Come on.
Swallowed it.
Yeah, I did. And when the bus, yeah, laugh if you want. I bet some of you have swallowed coins. You don't have to admit it, but I know. So when the bus came, one of the ways with segregated buses, depending on the bus driver, you could get on, put your money in, then get out and walk to the back of the bus, which is sign said white seat from front, colored seat from rear. So anyway, I got on the bus and he says, where's your money? And one of the girls who was maybe in the 3rd or 4th, they said she swallowed it. He said, get off the bus. And he was going to leave this 6-year-old girl by herself standing there. So a Black woman in the back said, I'll pay your fare. So she had to get off the bus, come put the nickel in for me, get off and go to the back. So segregation doesn't seem like, I see kids now, they go straight to the back of the bus. That's fine with me. But if you know the Rosa Parks story, you can get arrested. Those bus drivers could drive through water and splash on you. Actually in Montgomery, bus drivers had the power of sheriffs, and they actually killed people for breaking the law on the buses. So doesn't seem like much. So other parts that seems to me would be interesting to teenagers is we couldn't go, there was only one movie theater that allowed Black kids to go, and we had to go on the balcony. Couldn't sit on the lower level. School segregation, when we know not the same amount of money was for Black kids as for white kids. So I kind of forgot it. It was many, many years ago. But I have to tell you that in a segregated society, Black parents have a way of protecting their kids. One of the ways that among the Little Rock 9, the 5 girls, all the mothers sewed our clothes because they wouldn't allow us to try on clothes in the department stores. But we didn't care because our mothers were so good at it. So part of living in a segregated society is having a parallel supportive life that keeps. We went to a celebration of the desegregation crisis last year, September 25th. And all my children, I have 6 kids and I can't remember how many grandchildren, but my sister told my kids, she said, our parents thought she could do anything. So when you grow up with that kind of encouragement, it doesn't matter what they're doing outside because we had everything was colored white, hospitals segregated, cemeteries segregated, of course, churches. But so what you're leading up to is why did I want to go to Central High School?
Well, so it is, of course it is. We truly can't understand what happens in Little Rock. We don't at least mention the Brown v. Board case.
Yeah.
So can you remember what your family's reaction was to that decision, May 17th, 1954?
I don't think we talked about it, but my thought was, I think I was 13. Yes. I thought friends of mine lived across the street from white schools. And I thought, oh my goodness, now they can just go across the street to school. They don't have to travel a whole way. So that was my thought. That was what, but I think was the lynching of Emmett Till that was kind of the, do you know about that at all?
Do you want them to respond to you? They should.
Well, I mean, you can yell. I'm okay about that. You can say yes out loud.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was the following.
I'm not the teacher. You can do whatever you want with me. So that was really tragic to find out that a boy who was the same age as I was, 1 month older, was killed and tortured. And his mother showed the picture of his body. And it was mostly in the Black press, which is another whole phenomenon of knowing things. And I was really shocked by that. But because I wasn't very smart, and because the US, the school, even the Black school, we're told it's the best, United States is the best place in the world to live. Everybody wants to be here. It's liberty and justice for all, which I wasn't experiencing. I knew all the anthems, and I'm so old that I knew the Pledge of Allegiance before they put the word under God in it. And that we were to hide under our desks because the Russians wanted to bomb us. So the way it's done then and now is always to persuade you that you live in the best place, whether you do or don't, and that the enemy is outside. So that's how you grow up in the United States.
I appreciate that answer, largely because you have a mix of students in the room.
Yeah.
Some are learning about the Cold War right now, and you just talked about that's the context of the time period as well. We talked about Brown, we talked about Emmett Till. My understanding is that the school district in Little Rock said shortly after the Brown v. Board decision, we're going to adhere to the decision. It's going to take a few years. So what happened in 1957 was 3 years of the planning. And so when did school officials come to your school, and how did they make the request to see if students and families wanted to attend Central High found?
Well, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People filed some injunctions, had a group of Black kids who were part of that suit. And it was that filing of a suit that sort of pushed the Little Rock School Board to come up with a plan.
In one of the classes this morning, we talked about injunction, looking for the students there today. Do you remember discussing that today?
You want to talk about it?
Kalima, do you want to talk about it or no? No. Right. She'll warm up to us.
Okay. By the time you warm up, the bell is going to ring and you're all going to go out. So let's warm up now, okay? I can hear any question. You can challenge me. You can argue with me. Anything. I have 6 kids and they have trained me well. Okay.
We'll keep going. So what was the process like to?
Oh, and so those kids, when they finally came up with a plan, what happened for me is it came on in intercom for kids who live in the central district and are interested in going, give your name to your homeroom teacher. So the historians say there are different numbers. So I'd say about 100 Black kids expressed interest. And the reason, everything is too complicated. Okay, Central High School is in the middle of the city. When the Brown decision came, they built a school in the west of Little Rock, which was for white kids, maybe more affluent kids, and Horace Mann, which was for Black kids in the far east. It was a California-style school, which had breezeways. And so we had to have our coats on all the time to go from class to class. So, I mean, always the hand of bigotry is in. Okay, so I'm going back. So it comes on the intercom. I think my two best friends and I said, oh, let's go to Central. And we signed. And then later in the summer, we're called for meetings.
Well, hold on. So you volunteered for this and you didn't ask your parents?
Oh, I skipped home and told my mom I signed up to go to Central. So could you please yell out to me when you go home and tell your parents something? What do they say? Come on, I want to hear it. You're the quietest group I've ever seen. Come on. What do they say?
No.
You think so? No. They say, we'll see. And you know that as well as I do. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
Okay, we got it. And that's what she said. And that was it. But when we went to the meetings, the administrators said, well, if you come here, you can't participate in any clubs, any sports, any activities at all. You can just come. And I thought, I'm smart, I'm talented. That's going to go away in a couple of weeks, right? Because it doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense. But I thought that was just a mistake on their part.
Is this Daisy Bates? Or these are other folks in the NAACP?
No, this is the school administrators who had us come to them. Like Daisy Bates did the filing of the suits for the other kids. And I'm feeling like the school board tried to circumvent her participation and then just sent out the thing onto the two schools, junior high and high school.
And so the school board is saying you can't participate in extracurriculars, and I'm assuming you all did prior to. Was it because they couldn't protect your safety, or was there a reason?
You think they cared about us? I mean, it was to make, first of all, to make us say, I'm not going. And most people didn't, because you couldn't get scholarships if you didn't have extracurricular. I mean, the whole thing was designed to fail. I get that now. And so they thought if they said we couldn't participate, that we'd all say we're not coming. But many of the kids did say they were coming. We found out later that of the number of kids who showed interest, they only picked 20. But we didn't find that out until maybe 20 years later or something. Because, yeah.
I mentioned to you before that Terrence Roberts visited here in 2007. I asked him that question, and he said, I'm not sure how many students volunteered. I think it's 110. And then I've seen numbers all over the place.
Yeah.
So we don't really know what the number was. Can you explain to the students then why by fall of 1957, just 9 of you were left?
Well, what I can tell you is after saying you can't participate, I'm sure a lot of people fell off, said, no, I'm not going. On the day, there are all kinds of stories about who came and all that. I mean, I don't trust American history as far as I can throw it. Because of my understanding of that situation, and how it gets described and how it's full of flaws and Anyway, so I'm going to say Elizabeth, who's in the main pictures, was going to school. So she took the bus to school. Terrence Roberts was going to school. So he walked to school. My minister came by our house and said, I'm going with her. And part of the reason that, okay, so I'm going to tell this one story. So on the day when they were taking pictures, there were 9 of us. One of them was Jane Hill. And the other person who later became a part of Little Rock Nine didn't get there on the first day. But Jane Hill's father, I mean, they had already put our names and addresses in the newspaper that we were going to go to Central. So the craziness started way before school started. And Jane's father was told, get that girl out of there because you're going to lose your job. So Jane didn't become one of the kids who continued at Central. So where are we in the story?
Well, I want to open this up for one question from the audience. There was somebody in class today that asked me about, was there another school? Who was that? You asked me about do you want to ask your question here and then I'll.
Well, was there another school experience in somewhere in Central? I referenced Jerry Jones. I'm not sure if you know that.
Jerry Jones. Okay, so I'll tell you the story about that. There's Little Rock, and across the river is North Little Rock. And these Black boys decided they were going to go to North Little Rock High School. And they met a mob. And that was that. They were chased down. In Little Rock, the governor surrounded the school with Arkansas National Guard. And he didn't make it clear what the purpose was. He said, if integration happens, blood will run in the streets. And I didn't know whose blood it was going to be. So I thought, okay, we'll see. So it was very dramatic. And in that, that's what I mean. When you get a paragraph about Little Rock desegregation crisis, you're being cheated because it's one of the most complex United States history stories ever. Okay, it's so quintessential US history. So with the Arkansas National Guard around the school, the governor was claiming states' rights, which said that he was not going to adhere to federal policy. So when I say they planned the whole thing to fail, so we walked up to the school. Well, first Elizabeth was mobbed as she got off the bus. She was going to school. Now, mostly in US history books, it says, quote, this girl didn't have a phone, so she came alone. No, that is not the lead of that story. This girl got mobbed when she was going to school. So when you tell history like that, you soften the truth, you make it palatable, and it makes me so angry. And yeah, Jerry Jones was standing with a group of kids. He was 14, apparently, at the time. It's very interesting that he owns a bunch of gladiators in the current context.
That incident in North Central, and the students, the African-American students that went there, were they enrolled? Like they had just enrolled, or they going to enroll?
There was no, the North Little Rock School Board. So they took it on themselves. So to me, I'm going to throw in here, I think movements are people doing things simultaneously in different places for their own reasons. I mean, we kind of have made it into something that we think defines, but to me, it's not. So these boys decided that they were trying to go in the school because they saw Little Rock and how famous we became overnight. Woo-hoo. But the world media was there because the governor called out the National Guard. So let's see what you got here.
Yeah. Well, so I want to ask you a question. I may ask you again tonight.
I don't care.
I
I might have a different answer.
Well,
but-
one of the things that's often, in my view, that gets neglected in stories about Little Rock and Ruby Bridges and Hunter and Holmes, et cetera, is what happens to the Black schools. So can you tell us
couple
what
of things. Okay.
the white
Okay,
schools, just
well,
to be
we
clear,
have-
white schools are being integrated, Black schools are not. So
They
what
were
happens?
not integrated. We have not in the United States achieved integration to this point. That would call it desegregation theoretically. A couple of things. First of all, they're already giving the white schools more per student money because the school board is all white and blah, blah, blah. That's called segregation. The principal at Horseman had a Ph.D. from Columbia. All our teachers, the Black teachers, practically had advanced degrees because they might have gone to a historically Black college because there were two in Little Rock and one 50 miles away. And because they did not want Black students in graduate school, they would pay Black teachers to go and get a master's degree in Iowa, some other northern places. So it turns out that our teachers were much better educated than the central teachers because they could become certified with 1 year at Little Rock Junior College.
One of the disturbing things is the assumption that
Well,
white
whether-
schools and white educators were better than Black
Yeah.
schools and Black educators.
Right. So I don't say, why did I want to go to Central? Because it was 10 blocks. My friend Thelma and I and Melba could walk. That was our thought. Oh my goodness, we can walk to Central. Once I got there, white supremacy really dissolved in my mind. No, we're not going there yet. We're going to talk about the going and standing sandwiched between the Arkansas National Guard, who would allow white kids to walk in and would not allow us to walk in, and a mob of mindless people who were screaming hate and kill them, death threats, all mixed with religion. Sort of reminds me of current context stuff. Hate and religion all mixed up. And what happens to innocence when something like that happens? I had never been disliked by anyone. I was charming, talented, had a smile to die for. Who could hate me? So I think two things. I don't have a patriotic bone in my body, thank goodness, and any belief systems about your country, your city, just goes. It's gone. And it stayed gone. And I'm glad. It's good. It's good to have that kind of experience so that you learn forever, learn everything, keep reading. I feel like sometimes my head's going to explode. I know so much, which I'm not even able to use. But to me, I had to try to discover what would make people lose their minds, their intellect, their morality. I mean, there's a rumor that white women in the South are very delicate. Well, that day they weren't. Their mouths were open, screaming. horrible things. So one of the things that happens when I'm doing this is I'm here at 83, a perennial grandmother, but I'm also that girl, that beautiful girl. And when I talk about it, I have to go to it. So when I answer your questions, they are me being there and me being here.
And we're all grateful. Thank you for answering questions. Real quick, did Black educators lose their job?
Absolutely. There's a book called Integration's Pink Slip. Have you seen that? It's good. 100,000 Black teachers and administration officials lost their jobs with the desegregation. It's across the country.
I don't know if this is more rhetorical, but you saw the same thing happen when they desegregated professional baseball, Black baseball leagues.
Yeah, and so those guys they were really good. What do they call it? What do they call it again? The Negro leagues. Yeah. So one guy, Jackie Robinson, and the whole thing falls apart, right? Because what's her name? Robin DiAngelo, who wrote White Fragility, talks about the perception that Jackie Robinson broke the color bar. And the way she described it is they permitted Jackie Robinson to break color bar, that they were always in charge. And so you can read that book. I could recommend about 30 books, but you don't have time.
Well, that's one of the implications. This is more of a statement. I'll get to a question, but that's one of the implications of desegregation that teachers rarely challenge students to think about. Is if you're integrating something, what happens to a Black institution like baseball, or in this case, is schools and educators?
Yeah. So I mean, it's everything, right? So let me talk about we're skipping to closing the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened. So because of white institutions, Little Rock Junior College, so funny. They kept the cheerleaders and the football players when they closed the schools, by the way.
You're talking about the lost year, 58, 59?
That's what they call it.
Yeah.
And
So
blame us for it, but we didn't do it. So like 98% of white kids found other ways of getting educated, but only 50% of Black kids, they filled up all the small schools around. Something like that. People had to leave in order to go to high school. So it broke up families. I was the eldest in my family, and I was very much, I babysat. I was just really important to my family. And so I had to leave. And so I know what happened to other families when the kids had to leave. But it's a really good way of getting some people in the military, right? When you close the schools and 50% of the Black kids don't find a place. Everything is very diabolical.
So I'm not going to assume everyone in here knows what Mrs. Brown Trickey is talking about. After the 57-58 school year, the one that we're focusing on, the governor shut down the schools. And so no one can go to school. And that was the governor's new tactic on preventing the desegregation of Little Rock schools. Because what he tried 57-58 didn't work. And so that left people searching on where they were going to get educated that following school year.
Now, it's a really common tactic. It happened in Maryland, Virginia. We do all this stuff really well. So when you read that one paragraph about any given situation, you're being shortchanged about the complexity. I'm reading for the third time an Indigenous history of the United States. It's so good that I wish everybody could read it, because it doesn't just talk about the genocide, but it talks about all the things that were happening, all the legislation, all the presidents and people who did things. And so this, I'm gonna go crazy here. This thing of trying to deny Black history, it's all interwoven. You can't have American history without Indigenous history and Black history. It's all together. So I'm gonna talk more. I donated some articles, my graduation dress, 2 dresses, a letter from President Eisenhower, my expulsion notice, and a couple of other things to the Smithsonian American History Museum, not Smithsonian African American Museum, because this is an American history story. It is not an African American history. I had a woman who said, "Oh, I saw your dress in the African American Museum." I said, "It wasn't there." "Oh, yes, it was." "Why wouldn't it be?" I said, "Because it wasn't. It's an American history story, and it should be told in that way." Now, Carlotta's dress is in the African American. There are 9 of us. We have enough stuff to go around. We can be in every museum in this country, right?
So I'm going to ask a question. Somebody this morning asked about taking classes. So just prep yourself to ask that. Who was that? Okay, if it's Sono, just be ready. Let's real quickly before we go to Sona's question. Can you tell us your story?
My story.
So what exactly happens there in 57 with you and Edward?
Well, I signed up and I thought my 2 friends and I could walk to get to the colored school. Weird. There was no bus that went there. And in order to get there, you had to walk along this busy highway. Just intentional difficulty, right? So anyway, so I signed, finally, they said I could go. I guess, I don't know if they said it or not. I just know that I went there. The school asked that no parents come and that we not come on the first day. And we didn't know why the Arkansas National Guard was around the school. We found out that they were there to stop us. So
Labor Day. That's when the governor orders the National Guard there. The first day of school is the 3rd. You're told not to go.
yeah,
You wait until.
yes. I'm glad you have these things. And then we were like shocked and horrified and said, "Okay, go home." But in my mind, I was saying, "Oh, if you're willing to act like that, this is really important. So I probably will be back." And also our pictures appeared around the world. And we started getting letters from around the world because we were out for 3 weeks while there were injunctions filed, pro and con. We had to go federal. We learned so much civics, quote unquote. One of our lawyers, Thurgood Marshall, who later became Justice of the Supreme Court when it was really
1967.
Oh, thank you. But he was funny and silly, and he explained everything to us, and we loved him.
It's in Lincoln University, which is just 30 minutes from.
Isn't that amazing? We're all related, I don't care if anybody thinks we aren't, but we have these connections that if we knew some of this stuff, we would feel really personally connected to everyone, right? Our humanity is,
So your fall at the school.
Well, when we finally, the governor, the president No, we went for it on the 24th, I think. Have you shown them Eyes on the Prize?
So some students in here saw Eyes on a Prize in my class 2 years ago. Others I've talked to them, lectured. There was a class today that saw History Channel video, which is about 12 minutes. So
I like to see the pictures of them ready to storm school. I really like to see them there.
and that's it.
Because we always say, oh my God, there's been no mob violence before. Yes, there has. And I have very good experience with it. So people can tell you there's been no mob violence. I can tell you there has. And I really like to see the women pushing down the barricades to storm the school. So we had to be put into 2 cars, go into the basement, 2 cop cars, and the guys with the guns and the sticks are scared. I'm thinking, I guess I should be scared. And they're being told, once you start, do not stop. And we screech out of there. Please don't tell me. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, in the meantime, the mob is beating these reporters. God, on TV. I mean, the thing about this that cracks me up, they didn't care that the world could see them. They did not care. So they're beating specifically a reporter named Alex Wilson. They kicked him. They hit him on the head with a brick. It's right there. I mean, no secret. The president probably saw it. And oh my God, this isn't liberty and justice for all. What a surprise. And the Cold War, so I've talked to, I know this is way too complicated, I'm sorry. I've talked to Eisenhower scholars. One who says President Eisenhower sent the troops because of the Cold War, and the world was saying, oh my goodness, the United States, ooh, freedom and justice for all. Anyway, and the other said it was because he was interested in integration. Now, historically, he never said anything that would indicate that he was particularly interested in integration. But when your stuff is showing all over the world, you really got to do something about it. And so we were taken to school by the 101st Airborne Division, probably the most toughest paratroopers in the Army. And they surrounded us, took us in a armored vehicle. There were snipers on the top of the school. And they walked us in, surrounded. And there is history.
How long did the 101st stay there with you?
They stayed until probably October 12th, and the Soviets launched Sputnik, and suddenly the U.S. was interested in science.
So Sputnik was launched on October 4th.
Well.
And I know it took you out of the news.
Yes, so dare they.
But the 101st Airborne stayed another week and a half or so.
Yeah. And apparently, I think the Arkansas National Guard were federalized. But I mean, I think the mob was gone. Looked like it had calmed down.
So the soldiers from the Army were there until mid-October, and then they were redeployed, and then the Arkansas National Guard was federalized by the governor. So you still had
by the president.
By the president, that's what I meant. By the you still had military protection.
Sort of.
For how long? Sort of for how long?
Till the end of
What does sort of mean?
These were 18 and 19-year-old white boys. And they were good. One of the things they didn't see these girls attack me with a purse, and for the reason I got expelled. And there was a lot of stuff they didn't see. But after many years, this person who was an Arkansas National Guard called reporters and he said, he was ill, and he said, I can't keep it very much longer. I actually stopped 5 girls from putting Minnijean's head in the toilet. So they couldn't do things. I mean, I'm going to describe quickly. I'm sorry. I know you have questions, but it comes in this way. So when I talk about it, I talk about the choices people made. Like you could be one of 20 nice kids, which meant we had 2 people who were brave enough to be nice to us. About 200, I don't know what Terry say, it changes. I call them American terror at its finest, kids. But 1,700 kids who were silent witnesses. So we don't have a clue what they felt. But when you're silent, you're complicit with it. They weren't complicit with the nice kids. So we learned about peer pressure. So these young white boys in the Arkansas National Guard, it took him until he was an old man until he could tell that story. So that's how powerful this kind of peer pressure. In photos on the first few days when it was bomb threats every day, I was in the Glee Club class and I'm with those girls and we're singing. And behind us are people going, "Arr." So they forced those girls not to be. So this is the power of persuasion. They wanted to be nice.
Yeah. So you brought up Eyes on the Prize. So in Eyes on the Prize, it says there's some things in there that I know you question.
A question.
Terrence Roberts question.
Oh, good.
And so that the Eyes on the Prize suggests that you were expelled because of food fight in the kitchen or the cafeteria. Was it something different?
What? Just okay. You have to get your chili, your tray, your cutlery, all that, and we had to sit in the back because the cafeteria was full. And walking through between tables, and the chairs are slamming against me. And I don't really know what happened. I just remembered something like this. And chili splattered on 2 boys and me. And when we went to the girls' vice principal, he said she didn't do anything. And they got him out of that room really quickly. So yeah. So I got suspended because it was considered like a fight. You can't let this color girl get away with anything like that, right? But what they didn't tell you is that 3 times I had some kind of hot substance thrown on me. And the one time, the person actually apologized on Oprah. The one time, David Sante, when he threw whatever chili on me, they all hopped up on the tables and did 15 miles for Sante. And but it not do and covered with grease. And I said to myself, I am the queen of the world. And I threw my head up and walked out as if I had been anointed with something beautiful, which is why they hated my guts. They really did.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Sona, make sure you introduce yourself.
With all the various things that you want to enter the school and actually build it. So what was it like going there and helping like trying to get an education? Was it like hard, certain possibilities? What was that? Or did they feel
Can you include in your answer how often you were enrolled in classes with other members of the Little Rock Nine?
No, no, we were not in any classes together. The only time we saw each other was we were divided in half, and I don't know who the half person was because there were 9 of us for lunch. I can't remember learning anything that was related to lessons, except I was taking French. And when I got to New York, the school I was in, I had a really horrible Southern accent with French, so it was embarrassing. The other thing is the history book had a page on slavery, and it said the masters were kind, and it was the best thing that you could do for savages from Africa, and like this whole thing about what a good thing it was. And I thought, I'm in school. I raised my hand, said, Mrs. Stewart, this is not what I learned about slavery. She turned beet red, and the kids all told you they hated my guts. Just ask a question. So later in my life, I found out that their history books were written and approved by the Daughters of the Confederacy. And so every Southern and probably Northern child in the US had their books edited and written by the who said that the Civil War was about heritage and built all these statues in the early 1900s. So I didn't find that out until later. But I understand we live in silos of misinformation then and now. They were learning one thing. I was learning something completely different. And what they were learning didn't make sense to me. I can't remember anything about any kind of lessons or anything. I learned functioning in a very difficult situation, perseverance, persistence. Ooh, these words, I love them. Word that I probably couldn't have learned anyplace else. I learned that I would never hate anyone for any reason, even if I didn't agree with them. I learned that I would never be persuaded to be in a mob. So therefore, I am a pacifist. I am a practitioner of nonviolence. I teach nonviolence to young people. And the first principle, and these are the Kingian kind of combo. The first principle is nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. So I learned that. So those were all the things that I learned here are who I am, follow me through my life. And I tell that story as both tragic and beautiful. Because of the Little Rock Nine, we're some amazing people. We're kind of cool. We love each other. We're passing this on to our kids. And we don't know if we would have that much learning had we been in a different situation.
Can you tell us a little bit about what came of all 9 of you?
We scattered.
Well, how close were you in 57, 58?
Well, one, we didn't tell our parents what was happening because we didn't think they could take it. And just like you don't tell yours anything, right? You don't have to admit it publicly, but I know. And we didn't talk about what happened in the school. So that picture that's in that history book is us walking out of the school, and both Terrence and Jefferson were comedians extraordinaire. They were so funny, and the jokes weren't on us. So that's how we kind of like, we'd come out of school with a great deal of relief and saying, can you believe they thought they were superior to us?
Questions? Go ahead, Greg. Make sure you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Greg. I was wondering, like, how going to that school affected your life, like, outside of school, like, ever seeing those kids or seeing those people, like, in your actual life?
Great question. There were two students whose parents, mothers, were teachers, and they were threatened with being fired. And actually, one had to file a suit. Melba's mother had to file a suit, but she was fired. My father and Carlotta's father both had businesses of stone masonry, brick masonry, and landscaping. And the client, mostly white clientele. So my father lost his business, and Carlotta's father left and went to Colorado to get work. There was constant, because we had to answer the phone from my father's business, and this is practically the Middle Ages where one phone and blah, blah, and there was no, it was connected to the
Party lines.
Yeah, and so we had to keep answering the phone, hoping he would get business. But I had a 3-year-old brother. So there were all these hate calls, right? They were a constant. But you hear, this is a kid, this is a baby. So we pull the phone from him and they say, we're coming to burn your house down. We're going to kill you. Just all this to a baby, right? So we in order to drive around, my uncle gave me a car because they knew our license to our car. So they couldn't harass him. Couldn't really go anyplace because there was, and we got caught at whole family got caught at a rural barbecue restaurant. It's a Black guy who served blacks and whites. And while we were there, a group of white students came in, and like there were 3 of them. And we kind of go, oh my God. They came back with like a war. And the owner was a army buddy of my father's. And he took his army gun and slammed it on the counter and said, you're not going to hurt this family, so you might as well leave. I fought for this country. You're not going to. So the stuff like that all the time. So it means it's a total kind of thing. The whole idea is to scare you and to stop you and to say you can't do it and make you so scared that you won't. But we decided really early, maybe on the first day, individually and separately, that it wasn't about us. And that'll keep you going to something that just me, if it had been just about me, I would have hidden under my bed. But then when you realize this, because of the way they're acting, this is really important. And we have to keep going, right?
More questions from you. I'm going to ask one, but you guys signal me so I know that you have a question. I'm going to ask you this. Did you feel supported by the community? Meaning, did you have people in the community that would come to you or come to your parents and say, hey, whoa, watch it testing the status quo because you might bring real physical consequences to us here in the community. So did you feel support?
Yeah, people did feel that. And they were punished in the community. But so we had the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, who had this, made sure the national office, we had Jack Greenberg. Her name was Constance Baker, then later became Constance Baker. He had this commitment by the NAACP to see it through. With the legal stuff. I had hairdressers say, I'll do your hair, or I didn't lose any of my friends because I didn't talk about it to them. Yeah, we're supported. I mean, if I didn't, just like I don't hear people who disagree with me because I'm not around them. I didn't hear people who disagreed with me there, right? Because I wouldn't be around them. So the Ernest Green story, which is a Disney movie, which is probably maybe more accurate than American history books, but anyway, there's a woman who lived across the street from Ernie who said, people are going to get hurt, people are going to get jobs. We're okay the way we were, right? So that they did talk to us before they made the movie. So that came from Ernest, right? How does this go?
Good, it's going well.
Okay.
So
Introduce yourself.
oh, my name's Eli. It's nice to meet you.
I
I want to go and refer back to what you said before, talking about how you didn't tell your parents about anything that was happening inside of the Central. And I was wondering, how did you cope with what was happening? Like, how did you cope with what was happening with you without any kind of supports from your parents to go and talk to what was occurring?
Well, I don't know it. I'm still trying to write this memoir, and I don't have a way of describing it. But I would say that when something's really difficult, you come up with very weird ways of dealing with it. And what I kind of decided was, they've been lying to me all this time. You're supposed to be superior, but you're not. And so you kind of that's one of the things. Oh my goodness, I thought, but you can't think. And maybe they could read my mind, but because they really did hate me, but not overt or anything, but how do you do something difficult? You have to come up with some kind of weird, and I will admit that it was weird, way of coping. And mine was smiling and thinking I was, oh my God, all that. And so, but yeah, I mean, you got to be an actor. I could have gotten 20 Academy Awards and all kinds of stuff. And we could, because we were acting. Like, oh my God, so what? I'm still coming back. Oh, really? Still coming back. They did things like Elizabeth Eckford tells a story of had to take showers in gym. I don't know if you still do, but they figured out, and let me tell you something, those girls did not figure this out. How when she got in the shower, they turned off all the cold water. So she would be hot. In the boys' gym, same shower thing, they would fill it with steam and break glass on the floor. So I don't know if Terrence has got cuts like that. Did Terrence tell you that he was knocked unconscious in the basement? So we didn't tell them because we thought if we did, they would say you can't go. And we wanted to go. So what that leads to, the worst thing that happened to me was what do you call it? My mom was driving Thelma and Melba and Dee. And this boy just came and kicked me down. It's like skin knees, skin elbows, cartoon kick, I call it, right? Go flying through the air. And my mother saw it. That was the worst thing, because we didn't want them to know. And she was horrified. She went to the school and said, And they said to her, did a teacher see it? For her, that was the end for her. Like she suspected, but to see it up close. So that was the worst thing, because then my secret is out. My mother knows what's happening to me. And I didn't want it to. And I am not the only one who doesn't, who didn't, or who won't tell my parents everything. So there.
Thank you.
Hold on, why don't you stand up? We can't hear you, but also introduce yourself. Is there more that you've noticed that historians have gotten wrong about yourself?
Everything. The fact that it has a paragraph in American history books. There are about 200 books written about Little Rock, right? From how the media handled it's so complicated. And I wouldn't want them to mess your mind up with the complexity of it. But to give it that little bit, I know what you do. You mostly deal with war, because that's what the Americans have done really mostly throughout my life. So that's what history books are mostly about, right?
Yeah.
And maybe this other stuff gets a little tiny bit. What other story besides, okay, Ruby Bridges, if you're 6. So when I'm talking to second graders, they really love Ruby, okay? What other story has kids who are your ages doing something? What other inspirational story could you possibly have in your lives that would be useful to you too? This is unfortunate what's happening in my town, in my school. Maybe I could do something about it. So where else are you going to get it from? So I believe that part of the reason that you don't know about the story is because they don't want you to know what your potential is. So there.
Questions?
I know you guys can talk louder than this, right?
Fine. And the function. And
Okay. So how did the Little Rock story? Well, we always like, oh my goodness, what a surprise. Oh my God. Mob violence, hatred. What a shock. Keep having that. Repeating that. Oh my goodness. Is that about us? Oh no. In South Africa, they do this, and over there, they do this, and they teach Little Rock to teach kids in South Africa about apartheid. So excuse me, folks. I was in New Zealand in June. I talked to kids from 93 schools, and they knew this story backward and forward, okay? I can go to Belfast, Northern Ireland. I talked to you about that. They know this story. I walked into the most expensive liberal arts college in the country and asked, how many of you have heard of the Little Rock desegregation crisis? And nobody raises a hand. So yeah, what's that about? I have a question.
hello, my name is Rochelle. So I was wondering, looking back after all of your experiences and all that you've learned today and what you know now, is there anything that you would do differently?
There's nothing I would do differently. It would be that they would do something differently. Now, if I could wish, my daughters used to say, if I were a magic witch, I would say, they could have done something differently. I mean, when we talk about right now, there's all this talk about the great replacement. I think, what's this percentage of Black people in the United States?
In the US, 13-14%.
What? You got the biggest death machine ever assembled in the entire world. So what are 13% of the people going to do to you? Nothing. So there is no desire to replace. But we have these social myths that are very powerful, and people keep repeating them. Yeah. So this is damaging to you in terms of what are your aspirations? What would you like to see in your world? But when we're stuck with all this stuff, and so I wouldn't change what I did, but I would have changed. You know, if they had just let us in the school, we could have been dead in a ditch and nobody would have cared because nobody would have known. So the reason we have statues on the Capitol ground of the Little Rock Nine, yes, we do. And the reason we are honored outside this country a great deal more is because of their opposition to us being. So the opposition caused it to be historical.
Let's take a few more.
There's second Lauren class.
Hi, I'm Lauren. Talked about earlier about trying to get accepted to the school. My question was, pride in school, what did that mean to the average person back then? Because my parents personally, they still brag about each other's school. So I want to know from your high school experience there, like what did that mean saying that I go to this school or I should be accepted?
Well, my school, I mean, because you're in a segregated society, you're interacting with the US, the binary of Black and white men, that's it. So everybody, I call it silos, you know what a silo of misinformation. So they weren't crossing. There was no, because the US structured segregation in housing, people thought there's no cross, still isn't. I mean, I think we're looking at that now. It's like living in two different countries. People are getting completely different information, and there's no cross. I don't see it. I like to brainwash kids. I like the younger the better. That's my job in life. Talking about what you're capable of, your ability to both see things that could be changed, but to also do something about it. So I'm a criminal. I've been arrested for all kinds of civil rights things. I've been arrested for environmental stuff. So please, it's a life sentence. If you start off with a situation like Central High School, they formed us into activists. They made us into activists. And we all are active in different ways. I'm just trying to think.
So she asked about school pride. Why don't you tell her where you went after you left Little?
After I left Little Rock, I went to a small private progressive school that had no sports, maybe lacrosse or
Where?
in New York City. And I don't know who arranged it, but Dr. Kevin Clark, who is a famous psychologist,
Baby don't stop.
and his wife did projects that were called the Doll Study, where, anyway, that's what his claim to fame. But Dr. Mamie Clark was from Hot Springs, Arkansas. So he came to our house after I was expelled and said, she can live at our house and be roommate to my daughter. And I'm on the board of this private progressive school. Can she come? Or my mom said, she made the decision to go to Central. She's going to have to make this decision. And I didn't really I didn't want to be expelled. And I didn't want to leave my family. But I did. And the school was predominantly Jewish. It was relatively desegregated. And I was in the plays. We wrote our musicals. I was an ordinary kid. It was so my daughter, Spirit, who he knows, said the reason that I'm so compassion with a smart, sharp tongue is a completely, you have to have both. That the reason that I'm so compassionate is because of that experience in me. And she's probably right.
Is there anyone else? All the way in the back.
So do you think the nation has made any progress as a society since your experience? And then if so, do you think that based off of the recent political events that progress is?
No, it has not. I'm sorry to say that. Okay, so there's some minor desegregation in schools, but the bottom line is the housing segregation that makes the schools segregated, right? And that was structured by the government. My mother's deed, she bought a house in 60, and we just finished. It had no Mongolian, Hebrew, African, 5 categories of people who couldn't live in that house. It was called restrictive covenants. So anybody here, depending on the time of your ancestors' immigration, which any indigenous people here, well, it looks like you're all descendants of immigrants, right? Like it or not. I was in a car speaking at a New York university. I'm sorry, everything comes up to something else. A person put a MAGA cap on his dash when I got in. It was a 2-hour ride to the airport. Oh my goodness. And he wanted to know when my family immigrated. And I just said, didn't say anything. Looked at him and knew his family immigrated way more recent than mine, anyway. And he regaled me with all this unbelievable stuff about how we were brainwashing kids, just horrific stuff. And I didn't comment. I finally had enough. And I just said, okay, tell me about how long you've lived here. How many kids do you have? Because I couldn't hear any more of the craziness. Can't argue with people whose ideas are so stuck. So anyway, he became nice and talked to me about his family, how much he. So when I say that I don't interact with people I disagree with, sometimes you run into them without knowing, right? But I wouldn't have argued with. So what would I say? I'm going to use another group, indigenous people who about 20 or 30 years ago started going to law school, to medical school, get Ph.D s. And so now they have a voice. If it's not as big as some other voices. Well, the same thing happened with Black people. The GI Bill didn't allow Black men to go to school for quite a while. So white people got a head start on the education. But once they started, now we have scholars or who like me saying, this history is skewed. I could have said another word, but I said skewed. How you like me now? But come on, you guys, jeez.
In class, I just cold call. I don't wait for them to raise the hand, I just call them.
No, I mean that brilliant expression. I have a son who's a punster, and it's really hard to be around him.
Is there anything else? Okay, right here. Maybe the last one. Mina.
Hi.
So I'm over the long time at first school, science. And like as soon as I go to school, like go to school like we think like the national parks and like after you or like all
Okay. Okay, put that in like what do you really want to know?
Huh?
What do you really want to know? What do you really
I just want to know like what was one thing behind it?
Was there ever a moment you regretted the decision? Do you have that conversation in your head?
Yeah, did I have that conversation in my head? No, actually, honestly, it gave me a great deal of pleasure to contradict people's beliefs about who I should be. And that's good stuff. I mean, you know, you say, how did you do it? Well, that was a good way. It's like, woohoo, really? You know, I mean, kind of like in my mind. But a sociologist went to Little Rock later. Sorry.
Remember, you got your camera.
By Advil, whatever. And talked to women who had been students. And they said, oh God, she was ugly. Oh God, she this. And oh, we really hated her. And finally, I guess sociologist said, well, why did you really hate her? And they said, we hated her because she walked the halls of Central like she belonged here. So guess what? That was 40 years later. And it was only then that I could forgive myself for getting expelled when I realized this is what you were up against, right? Okay, you did pretty well. You only used 2 words and got called the other words 10 trillion zillion times, which is why I don't tolerate hearing that word. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's the answer to your question, but that's what I came. Yeah.
All right, well, let me give Minnijean a round of applause. So we have a little bit of social time here. If anyone was afraid to ask a question or whatever, feel free to come on up, maybe ask for a picture or whatever.
Yeah.
We got a little bit of time, and I'm gonna dismiss us from here. Okay, so just social time here, meet and greet. Feel free to chat.
Hi, that was a